speak on behalf of the British people who support Donald Trump, but who are too scared to say it for fear of being called racist. On Sky News, you stated earlier this year that he shouldn't be allowed to come to the UK while the travel ban was in place. My question is, do you think it's responsible for the Mayor of London to show such disrespect to the 45th President of the United States, as well as the millions of Americans who he represents, and the Londoners who you claim to represent?
Right, okay. Well, I think the UK and the US have a really important and a very special relationship. I think that's as true now as it was 70 years ago, when Winston Churchill first talked about it. And one of the things about a special relationship, it's like you having a best friend. Of course, in times of adversity, you stand shoulder to shoulder with them. It's really important when you have a special relationship. But you know what? When your best mate's wrong and out of order, you tell them you're bang out of order and you're wrong. And I'll tell you this. If you study the history of the United States of America, it is a great country. It is a country that was formed on the basis of immigration. Just think about the Statue of Liberty in Staten Island. Think about the history of that fantastic country. It's been a beacon for tolerance, for civil liberties, for human rights for decades. Now, if it's the case that President Trump is ending a refugee program, if it is the case that he's having a travel ban on 7 countries, which the only thing they've got in common is they're Muslim countries. I'll make a simple point. Of course you're still welcome to come here, but not on a state visit with the red carpet being rolled out. And that's my view. But you know what? I will fight for your right to have a different view. Right? That's really important. And that's what's important.
Peter Hitchens, those who feel disillusioned with the current political system, obviously,
are right to do so. They have been systematically betrayed, and I see no end to it. There are so many issues which have been visited on this country by an elite of self-selecting, closed-minded people, as well represented here this evening, and actually largely incompetent as well, which have done enormous damage to our way of life. So, for instance, who now has anything to say about the deindustrialization of this country and the destruction of manufacturing jobs under the Thatcher government? Who can reverse it? Who can do anything about it? Who will say anything on this panel about the catastrophe of mass immigration, which has changed this country irrevocably into somewhere completely different from what it was? They won't talk about it. They won't talk seriously about the immense problems of crime and disorder, which affect millions of people in their homes and leave them utterly vulnerable to all kinds of unpleasantness and violence and menace, which they never used to have time to go. And there is no sense whatsoever that there will be any reform of the criminal justice system or any attempt to put it right again. These are just some of the subjects on which this elite just constantly refuse to discuss.
Why?
Why? Because they themselves have an ideology. They themselves have the ideology of metropolitan bourgeois bohemians. They despise most people outside.
What, are you man of the people?
They despise them. Well,
I mean, you're the only person on this panel
I'm no more a man of the people than you are.
I don't claim to be, but you're making a picture on me.
I'm simply saying these are the things which they will not do anything about, which they will not do, because they themselves benefit. They themselves benefit from many of the things which do immense damage. They've benefited from globalization. They've benefited from mass immigration.
Talk about mass immigration. Let's talk about immigrants coming over here, propping up our NHS, treating us
They're not affected. They're not affected. Their children don't go to bog standard comprehensives. They're not affected. They're not affected by crime. Yes, I do know how I'm talking about, because I know what they do all the time. They will not discuss these things. They will not do anything about them. They ignore what you say, and you think that at general election time you can do something about it. No, the people who stand before you at general election time for the political parties are people who've been pre-selected. You have no control. If I stood for Parliament, or if he stood for Parliament, from our positions, which are quite popular, the fact is the party machines would erase us. The immense amounts of money they're capable of spending, the enormous access they have to the broadcasting organisations, which we don't have most of the time, would make it impossible. Make it impossible.
You've got more access than I have,
would make it impossible. On the contrary, would make it impossible for anyone outside
Peter, sorry. The question was, what would you say to people who feel like you clearly do
what I've just said.
Political association?
I just said it.
Well, no, wait a moment. What would you say to them about how to change things? Are you going to stand as an MP?
I'm sorry.
Are you going to stand as an MP?
No, because for the reasons I've just explained, I wouldn't have the faintest chance. No, my advice to anybody young enough to do so is to emigrate before it's too late.
Oh, for goodness sake. I mean,
this is
the paper that hates Britain, you heard it here.
This is a ridiculous council of despair. I think our country's best days are ahead of us, not behind us. And I think Peter Hitchens needs to get with the programme. I got involved in politics, actually, through my mum, who was a member of the CND and used to take me on CND marches. Oh, wow. And I thought this is interesting, exciting. It was the 1980s. There was a big debate about ideas. And I think that, you know, if you want to be involved in politics, you can be involved in politics. And I want more people to be involved in politics. I think we should make Parliament more open, more easier to access, more friendly to people from different backgrounds. I think it is becoming quite an elite of a particular type of professional. I think that's a problem. We need to think about the way it operates, the terms and conditions, all those kind of things. I'm excited by the primaries that we've done in the Conservative Party to get a wider group of people involved in politics. We need to revive local... No, we've got some new ones coming up, actually, David. Maybe Question Time might be involved. But what we need to do is we need to open up politics. We need to make local government count through localism so that people are involved. But this idea that everything is always awful, that's one of the reasons why people turn off politics, because they just hear this constant moaning.
The Daily Mail might call you the man who hates Britain. After what you just said.
Exactly.
The Ed Miliband of our day.
You're free to call me.
I mean, it's not the Rafe Miliband.
It's not Britain I hate. Britain I love. Every field and hedgerow. It's the people who run it.
Or the people who live here.
And who are wrecking it. And so, like anybody who cares about his country, I'm distressed by it. I see no hope from these interchangeable people. She was a Liberal Democrat. For all I know, she still is.
Let's hear from
I mean, just before I answer the question, we've just got to get away from this nonsense that is peddled by Peter and people like him, that immigration is some kind of curse in this country. It is a blessing. It has made...
Sorry to pick up once again on the fact that, again, Mr. Glass has said that you, ladies and gentlemen in the room, are propping up or pro-dictator regimes, that you in this room are doing deals with Saudi Arabia. Ladies and gentlemen, the West may have made and has made grotesque errors in propping up dictators in the Middle East. But we also manage not to prop them up. We've also, if you like, we have the antidote to poisons within us. Can that be said of other societies to the same extent? And please note Mr. Dalrymple's use of the word we. It was we when it was people carrying out massacres in the West, in the past, your forebears. It was only we when it's us doing bad things. When is it we expressed by Mr. Dalrymple of pride of what the West has done? That he cannot bring himself to do, and I hope you note it, ladies and gentlemen. This is masochism, and it's being offered to you by a sadist.
Right. I make no apology for reminding the audience in this room about Western history. I'm a historian. And I think, you know, if we forget what we've done, so much of Western colonialism simply isn't taught in our classrooms. The history of the extinction of all these hundreds of different tribes and peoples who we have driven to extinction, we don't know about this. I particularly make no apology for mentioning the Holocaust. The Nazis were certainly not afraid of asserting the superiority of Western values.
Oh, good.
No, it's a very serious point.
With that.
It's a very serious point. And they contrasted their Western and their rooted German values as they saw it No, it is an absolutely serious and essential point.
Sorry, please ask everybody else to stay seated so you get more talking time that way. Unless you actually want to.
I'm happy sitting.
Very good. Okay.
Mr. Dalrymple did, however, just make an allusion there. He talked about the West's virtues. He talked about it being rich and productive. He did not focus, for instance, or even mention the fact that it is also free. I think this matters, ladies and gentlemen. He was counting the amount of money you make, not the virtues of your life or the values of your systems or the rights that you enjoy. I'm quite loath in a way to mention Iraq, but somebody just did. This is usually the moment at which I start to lose the debate. But I would, since most of you voted anyway, it doesn't matter. Iraq would indeed be a much better place if the parties of God were not killing our secular friends and allies there. And I think it's a grotesque thing to hold the West and Western values and liberty and freedom and democracy and the rule of law, blame them for religious fundamentalists blowing up our secular allies. And I hope you noticed that, ladies and gentlemen. And why we compare them with Muslim values? I agree with the lady. We could have focused on Buddhist values. We could have focused on any other types of values. The reason why it kept on coming back to it is, as you know, because this is the matter of our time. And it is not hard at the moment to notice the calls for the different type of societies that people want to create. And that there is a clear difference. And I hope, ladies and gentlemen, when you vote for the right side tonight, you make this clear. There is a difference between the Western states which practice their own values that we sometimes mistakenly call Western values. And yes, we should call them liberal values, and yes, we should call them universal values, but we identify them with the West because they came from the West, because they were nurtured in the West, and that they are hopefully, I hope you will agree, asserted by the West.